Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
Wake up, wake up, it's time to rise and sing the praise of Jesus. Hallelujah, hallelujah. It's time to rise, to sing, to shout, to bring him all your heart. He'll do the bigger part if you will only make a start.
Have a great day, 7-minuters. Today, I am very happy to tell you that there will be a special devotional that will be given every Thursday and Friday morning. Instead of having our normally practical, simple, and illustrationally based presentation of the devotional, we will be having a review of the Sabbath School lesson of the week. That means, every week, we will be tackling the lesson in 2 parts. The first part will be uploaded Thursday, early morning, and the second part will be uploaded every Friday morning. Well, we will not traditionally study the lesson, but we will not point deeply to the theological references, but we will view the lesson from the practical views of life. So again, let me remind you of our innovations in our inspirational devotional schedules. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday, we will have devotionals based on inspirational topics with practical lessons in life. But during Thursdays and Fridays, we will be tackling the Sabbath School lesson as a form of a practical review for people who wants to have a different perspective of the lesson quarterly. So, today is Thursday. The title of our devotional today in relation to our Sabbath School quarterly is Restless and Rebellious. Well, are you also a restless and rebellious person? Or was there a time in your life wherein it is inevitable to have restlessness and rebelliousness as part of the rough journey of life? Well, our verse for inspiration is found in 1 Corinthians 10 verse 11. It says, "Now all of these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition upon whom the ends of the ages have come." So it's very clear. Our lesson for today happened during the time of the Israelites, happened during the time of Moses, but it is for our present admonition. It is for us that this was written. So let us listen and get something from this. Now, why restless and rebellious? What could have been the essence of this week's lesson? Now, there are 2 points to introduce the opening points of the lesson. Point number 1. Restlessness and rebellion happens because there is abnormality, meaning there is a need to know what went wrong before pointing out that the occurring restless and rebellious act is evidently wrong. Well, sometimes we are quick to judge that when one person is restless, when one person is rebellious, right away he is wrong. However, let us afford everyone the opportunity to explain why there was restlessness, why there was rebellion. Why? Because sometimes deviation also creates civilization, or deviation from wrong makes things right. So not all restlessness and rebelliousness are actually premised on a bad scenario. Point number 2. Situational normality is not always divinely correct. Now let me make the point clear. Your situation now, even how comfortable that is, even how normal that is, it is not directly considered divinely correct. However, if its disturbance will not be addressed correctly, it will make the right things look wrong and the wrong things look right. That is why there is a need for explanation and not condemnation on the matter. Now, our lesson deals with restlessness and rebellion. People become restless because there is something that is new to them or something they are not used to. Whether this is right or this is wrong, these people needs explanation. That's why God was never tired of explaining to them why there is a need to follow God and have that faith. It's not always that we need to discard people because they are rebellious, because they are restless. we have to know the root of this restlessness and rebelliousness, because by knowing the roots, we can actually address the problem and create longer and more stable solutions. Let us go to Sunday's lesson. The title is Restless in a Wilderness. Well, there are 3 points I want to share with you in this part of the lesson. Number 1, be careful when you complain to God. Realize that God knows everything and we humans only dwell on our perspective. If God will allow your wrongful requests, well, that may lead to a greater tribulation. Again, God is all-knowing. He knows what will happen. He knows what can happen. So, if we will disobey God because we want to follow our own wants, well, this might result to a greater tribulation. Second point, myopic leadership is a great issue. Moses then asked God why he has to deal with the complaints alone. Well, the myopic view here is Moses was not alone from the start. He was with God. Oftentimes, we forget that our struggles as leaders are actually a partnership with God. That's why sometimes we feel fear, sometimes we feel that we are alone, sometimes we feel that we are almost at the brink of our patience, because we forget that in this ministry, in this travel that we have in this world, doing God's work, we are not alone. We are in partnership with God. Your failure is God's failure. Your success is God's success. That's why do not feel like Moses that you feel everybody left you and you are carrying the complaints of these people alone, because that is never the case. Third point, comfort is not necessarily correct. Let us not misinterpret what is right with what is comfortable. Oftentimes, faith in God allows challenges to sharpen it, while a life of comfort dwells on worldly contentment. The more we get used to secularism, the harder it is for us to determine what is divinely right. Now consider this experience of the Israelites. They were used to the comforts of Egypt, and when they were brought to the real comfort, which is God's method, they were already uncomfortable. So the reminder is, comfort is not necessarily correct. Let us not misinterpret what is right with what is comfortable. Why? Because oftentimes, faith in God allows challenges to sharpen it, while a life of comfort dwells on worldly contentment. Now let's go to Monday's point. The title is, It's Contagious. Leadership rifts are very dominant destructors of our church and faith. Oftentimes, we fail to focus on the roles we played in God's ministry because we are more concerned with the ranks, profiles, promotions, and command responsibilities. This is a contagious and effective destructive strategy that God's intelligent enemy imposes on our church. An attitude Aaron and Miriam displayed against Moses. Remember, Aaron and Miriam said, "We are older. We are much more trained." Miriam said, "I am a congregational leader. Aaron is a priest. Why Moses?" Well, sometimes God chooses people because these people are dependent on Him, not because they are great and not because they have ranks. Remember that always. The leadership in God's system carries two great facts. Number one, God chooses leaders for the system. And number two, if man chooses to disrespect the leader of God's system, it is also a disrespect to God. So there is a reminder that the leaders of our church are chosen by God. Sometimes they commit mistakes. Sometimes they are also weak. But it is the reminder of God that they should be respected because they were placed there and anointed by God. If you disobey the leader, if you disrespect the leader of the church, you are also disrespecting God. God chose Moses to lead his people because he was very dependent on God. Other leaders would have only used God as an optional advisor or a referral agent. But Moses, he leads because he is holding on to God. The weakness of Moses being dependent is actually his greatest strength because he does not trust himself alone. He needs God's approval. Now, Tuesday's points. The title for Tuesday's lesson is Restlessness Leads to Rebellion. Point number 1 here. Restlessness happens when there is an unclear concept of faith that we have with God. Faith stabilizes our hearts because it is a covenant that God will not leave us. The moment this becomes unclear, there is restlessness caused by faithlessness. In fact, there is one saying, the only time we fear about situations in life is if we forget that God has led us in the past. If we are always forgetting that, then we will always become restless and rebellious. Second point, the spies are sent to have surveillance of the land that they have to conquer. Surveillance report, dear friends, should be factual, integral, and free of personal opinion. However, if you notice, these spies that Moses sent, incorporated their emotional content on the report, and much more, their faithlessness in that report. That's why they misled God's people. When we are doing ministry for God, it should be facts, it should be truth, it should be what is written. By putting our own interpretation, putting our own version, putting our own ideology, we are misleading God's people, and that can be a source of restlessness. Point number 3. Restlessness in physical viewpoint happens because we lack rest and sleep. That is very similar to the people of Moses, a people during Moses' times. Instead of keeping peace, thinking and meditating on God's commands, they become physically restless, which lead them to be tired. And then pointless rebellions occurred as part of unfounded frustrations. Well, in the medical point of view, when we are tired, when we lack sleep, when we lack rest, we become irritable. When we become irritable, we are very fastly getting angry. When we are fastly getting angry, we are restless. When we are restless, we always commit rebellion. We always commit error. So sometimes it is a blessing that when we are feeling that there is a lot of turmoil happening around, let us keep our peace. Meditate. Talk to God with your inner self. Because the more we rest, the more we keep peace, the more that we can think of a better way to understand God's promises. Again, restlessness and rebellion is a product because God's people may have lacked rest, may have lacked sleep, may have lacked peacefulness in their hearts. As of this moment, we will be ending the first part of our special devotional entitled Restless and Rebellious. Before we will separate ways, let us first listen to this song by the King's Herald Quartet entitled One Thing I Ask. Yes, if there's one thing I ask, I will ask the Lord to forgive me because as a Christian, I have a tendency to be restless and rebellious.
Is to see you,
we are not done here. Dear 7-minuters, we are just tackling the reasons for the rebellion and the restlessness of God's people. We are just trying to understand the tip of the iceberg, why they are acting that way. We are trying to analyze what led them into that kind of mentality and action. Well, catch us again tomorrow for the second part of this episode entitled Restless and Rebellious. Tomorrow we will have Restless and Rebellious Part 2. God is really happy because we never fail our daily 7 minutes with Him. God bless everyone.
Wake up, wake up, it's time to rise and sing the praise of Jesus. Hallelujah, hallelujah. It's time to rise, to sing, to shout, to bring.
Wake up! Wake up!